Some betrayals come loud, slammed doors, raised voices, broken dishes. But the worst kind? They walk in quiet, sit next to you on the couch, kiss your cheek goodnight, and light the match after you're already asleep. That's how it felt the day I found out my girlfriend, Lena, had been cheating. Not just cheating, mocking. Not just mocking, planning a future with someone else. And not just anyone. With my boss. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the moment I realized my whole world had been rewritten without my permission. It started small, the way these things always do. A late night here. A vague excuse there. A laugh she didn't explain. Lena and I had been together for nearly 3 years. We met at a friend's housewarming, bonding over our shared hatred for pineapple on pizza and love for bad 80s action flicks. She was magnetic, sharp, sarcastic, and stunning in that way that made people orbit her without realizing it. She liked to say we balanced each other out. She brought the chaos, I brought the calm. We lived together in a one-bedroom apartment downtown, a place that always smelled faintly like coffee and ambition. I worked in sales for a mid-sized tech company, grinding my way up the corporate ladder. My boss, Dean, was one of those guys who played pickup basketball with interns but still somehow closed million-dollar deals in a hoodie. He was cool. Too cool. The kind of man who made you second-guess your handshake. He met Lena once, briefly, at our company holiday party. I introduced her, proud as hell, because she looked like a dream in that black dress. Dean smiled that charming smile of his, said something smooth about how lucky I was, and moved on. Or so I thought. A few months later, things with Lena started shifting. Not big changes, just, off. Her phone suddenly lived face down on the table. She started using words like space and clarity. She said I was getting too comfortable. That I wasn't stepping up. One night, after I offered to do the dishes, she looked at me like I was a puppy begging for approval and said, and I'll never forget it, "You're not a real man, you know that?" The words hit like a gut punch from a ghost. I didn't even know what she meant at first. I asked her to explain. She rolled her eyes, said something about how I let people walk all over me, and don't take charge. Said she wanted a partner who led. Someone decisive. Someone who commanded respect. She didn't say Dean's name. She didn't have to. The pieces didn't fully fall into place until 3 weeks later, on a random Wednesday afternoon. I was eating a sad sandwich at my desk when my phone lit up with a notification. "Lena added you to a group chat," she said. "Yes." Ring party popper. I thought it was a mistake. Some wedding planning group she meant to send to her sister. I opened it, expecting awkward flower arrangements or Pinterest boards. But no. It was a full-blown engagement party invitation. And the first message? "We're so excited to celebrate our next chapter with the people we love most. Come toast to the future, Lena and Dean Ring." Dean. My boss. I stared at the screen like it was in another language. I scrolled up. There were photos already, a ring, her hand in his, champagne flutes, a blurry picture of him kissing her cheek with the Eiffel Tower behind them. My heart dropped like an elevator with the cables cut. The rest of the group was our circle of friends. People I'd introduced to Lena. People who'd sat at our kitchen table and laughed at our dumb inside jokes. And there they were, hearts and claps and "OMG, so happy for you." Not one of them had reached out to me. Not one. I sat there in my office, fluorescent lights buzzing above, watching my phone fill up with love notes to the 2 people who had ripped my life apart like it was a party favor. My hands were shaking. Not with anger. Not yet. Just disbelief. Because it wasn't just the cheating. It was the performance. The rewrite. The idea that she'd not only betrayed me, she wanted me to watch her celebrate it. And worse, she'd invited me to clap. After the invite hit my phone, everything slowed down, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in that horrible, suspended animation where your brain refuses to accept what your eyes just read. Dean. Dean. My boss. The man I'd shaken hands with 3 times a week, looked up to, tried to impress, sometimes even defended when the office gossip painted him too slick, too smooth. Turns out, the gossip didn't go far enough. I didn't respond to the group chat. I just left it. Quietly. No message, no drama. Just a little, Luis left the conversation, at the bottom of their love-soaked celebration. I figured the silence would say more than anything I could type. 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing, texts from friends, the same ones who'd clapped under her ring photo like they hadn't sat next to me through every chapter of our relationship. Hey man, you okay? Didn't know you were in the group, that was probably awkward lol. Look, it's complicated, but maybe it's a good thing in the long run. A good thing. I didn't respond to any of them either. Because there's a certain kind of betrayal that words can't fix. Not sorry. Not, it's complicated. Not, they just fell in love, you know. No. Love doesn't grow in the dark. It grows when people choose each other every day, even when it's messy, even when it's hard. And Lena? She'd already chosen her exit before she ever lit the match. And then there was work. Walking into the office the next day felt like walking into a hostage situation where I was the only one who hadn't been told who had the gun. Dean wasn't there, thank God. He was still in Paris, apparently, sipping champagne with my ex and sending emojis to people he thought he'd already beaten. But the whispers had started. You know the kind, not loud enough to call out, but just enough to feel. A pause when you enter the break room. A glance too long when you refill your coffee. And one poor guy from HR who patted me on the back and said, "Tough break, man. Heard it was messy." Like I'd dropped my lunch, not been gutted from the inside. Later that week, Dean returned. He walked into our Thursday morning meeting like nothing had changed. Wore a fresh tan, a smug grin, and a wristwatch that probably cost more than my rent. Didn't say a word to me. Just carried on with Q4 projections and team goals like he hadn't just detonated a nuke in my personal life. And that was when it clicked, he wanted this to be professional. He wanted me to be the one to make it awkward. Because if I broke, if I cracked in public, then he could paint me as the bitter one. The jealous employee who couldn't handle success, his success. His job. His fiancée. His story. So I did what I had to. I smiled. Nodded through the meeting. Took notes. Answered questions. And walked out with my dignity intact, at least outwardly. Inside, I was unraveling. Because the truth is, I thought about quitting. More than once. Thought about torching the whole thing, walking into HR, pulling up my resignation, maybe even dragging his name through the dirt just to level the ground again. But something held me back. Not fear. Not pride. Just resolve. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't slamming the door. It's staying in the room long enough for them to realize they didn't break you. That afternoon, I went to HR. I didn't throw accusations. I didn't weep or rage. I asked questions, professional, pointed, careful questions. Like, what's the policy on relationships between executives and subordinates, even if indirect? Like, if someone felt the power dynamic was abused, where's the protocol for that? I watched them shift in their seats. Jot down notes. Say things like, of course, this is sensitive, and, you've done the right thing bringing it to us. I didn't name names. Not yet. Because I wasn't sure if I was ready to fight that war. But I was sure of one thing. I wasn't leaving. Not quietly. Not now. Because if Lena wanted to call me not a real man, she was about to see how wrong she really was. There's a unique kind of torment in having to coexist with the person who gutted your life and the man who helped her do it, especially when one signs your paychecks and the other one's called you her safe place. I won't lie, the weeks after that group chat bombshell were brutal. Dean kept things surface level. No direct comments. No gloating. Just polite nods, tight smiles, and a few too many "hey buddy" moments that made my skin crawl. But the company had an end-of-quarter mixer on the calendar, something Dean had scheduled long before he turned my relationship into a punchline. Normally I'd skip it. But something told me I needed to be there this time. Not to cause a scene. Not to prove anything. But to stand in the same room they thought they owned, and not flinch. The venue was upscale. Rooftop bar downtown. Free drinks, ambient jazz, the usual corporate mingle trap. People wore their best button-downs and most strategic smiles. I came alone, suit pressed, tie sharp, and a calm in my chest that surprised even me. Dean was already there, of course. Holding court near the bar, laughing with a few execs, hand resting a little too comfortably on the small of Lena's back. Yeah, she came too. And just like that, my private nightmare became company news. Whispers started before I even grabbed a drink. Some people avoided eye contact. Others gave those awkward, "I heard, but I don't know what to say," nods. But a few, the ones who knew me beyond Slack messages and team updates, came over with real questions. One of the developers, Hannah, pulled me aside. Said, "Is it true?" I didn't even know they, you know. I didn't tell her the full story. Just said, "It's been a weird month." She grimaced. "God, I'm so sorry. That's messed up." I gave her a half smile. "It's okay. I'm still standing." Then came the moment I didn't plan for. Dean walked up. Lena on his arm. Cool as ever. "You made it," he said, like we were just two guys who once grabbed a beer after work. "Wasn't sure you'd feel up to it." Lena didn't look at me, just kept sipping her drink, eyes locked on the skyline like I wasn't real. I looked at him and said, "Didn't want to miss a party. Especially when I already paid for the first act." He blinked. Just a flicker. A crack in the glass. He chuckled like I'd made a joke. But the room shifted. People nearby went quiet, not dramatically, just enough for it to register. A moment passed between us, him waiting for me to explode, or retreat, or just leave. I didn't. I turned back to the conversation I'd been in with Hannah. Picked it up without missing a beat. Let them stand there in the uncomfortable shadow they cast together. That should have been it. But fate, or irony, had other plans. Because 30 minutes later, Lena slipped. Not a fall. A comment. I just stepped into the hallway near the bathrooms to take a call when I heard her voice. Around the corner. Talking to one of the other department heads, someone new. Someone clearly unaware of the tangled web she was standing in. She said, laughing, "Dean's great. Way more assertive than Luis ever was. I mean, I used to joke he was a half manager, half boyfriend." I froze. Not because it hurt, though yeah, it stung. But because the man she said it to was on the ethics committee. And he heard every word. He didn't laugh. He didn't even respond. He just stepped past me a second later, gave me a quick glance, not of pity, but of understanding, and kept walking. By Monday morning, HR had a new case file open. Not started by me. Started by him. See, when power plays get sloppy, they forget that not everyone watching is rooting for them. And Dean and Lena? They got sloppy. Mixing personal with professional. Public with private. Smug with stupid. I didn't know how it would shake out yet. But I knew this. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. And I hadn't even lifted a finger. Corporate justice doesn't come with a gavel. It comes in whispers. In closed-door meetings. In sudden calendar invites marked, confidential. That Monday morning, I got one of those invites. Subject line, Employee Relations Inquiry. No details. Just a time, a room, and a sense that the game had shifted. I showed up early. Shirt ironed. Notes in hand, not that I needed them. I wasn't the one on trial. 2 HR reps were already seated, laptops open, polite smiles fixed in place. One of them, Melissa, sharp as a blade in pearls, asked how I was doing. I told her I'd been better. She nodded, like she appreciated the honesty. "We're here," she said, "because concerns have been raised about workplace conduct involving Mr. Dean Hayes. Specifically, conduct that may have created a hostile or inappropriate work environment." I didn't flinch. Didn't smile. I just said, "I assume you're referring to his relationship with my ex." Melissa gave a tight nod. "Among other things." Apparently, Lena's little hallway performance at the mixer hadn't just offended me, it had gotten under the skin of the wrong person. That department head she spoke to? His name was Darren. Freshly hired, former compliance officer for a Fortune 500. The man knew policy like a preacher knows scripture, and when he heard a new executive's fiancé trashing a subordinate's masculinity in the context of workplace dynamics, his radar went red. Turns out, Lena had been more vocal than anyone realized. Bragging. Comparing. Making it known that Dean was an upgrade, not just personally, but professionally. That he got things done. I gave my statement calmly. Detailed timeline. No embellishments. No theatrics. I told them what I knew, what I saw, what I heard. I didn't ask for justice. I just told the truth. The following week, Dean was noticeably absent. Rumors started to swirl. On leave, someone said. Personal matters, said another. But the truth? He'd been suspended pending an internal review. Lena, meanwhile, went quiet. I heard through the grapevine that she'd pulled back from the friend group. That her engagement photos disappeared from social media. That she'd been venting about company politics and how I had manipulated the system. I didn't respond. Didn't defend myself. Because the moment you stop needing to explain your worth to the people who never valued it, you get your power back. A month later, HR called me in again. This time, the energy was different. Melissa smiled, genuinely this time, and said, "We wanted to inform you that Dean Hayes is no longer with the company. His departure was mutual." Which is corporate speak for, he jumped before we pushed. They thanked me for my professionalism. Said they admired how I'd handled a challenging personal matter with discretion and integrity. And then, casually, like it was no big thing, she slid a new title across the table. Team lead. My old manager's position. Mine now. No fanfare. No favor. Just earned. I walked out of that room not just promoted, but free. Free from the version of me Lena had tried to shrink. Free from the story Dean thought he could write over mine. Free from every lie that tried to make me feel less than. And here's the kicker. They replaced Dean with Darren, the same guy who reported him. The man who'd heard the worst of it and still said, "That guy. He knows who he is." That afternoon, I cleaned out Dean's old office. His chair still had the groove of someone who thought he was untouchable. I sat down in it, leaned back, and smiled. Not because I won. But because I never had to play dirty to get here. You learn a lot about people in the fallout. Not in the crisis itself, that's when everyone's loud. It's in the weeks and months after, when the dust has settled and folks think it's safe to pick a side. Turns out, plenty of people had quietly picked Lena's. Not loudly. Not publicly. But enough that I started noticing who stopped texting. Who muted the group chat instead of leaving it. Who said we didn't want to get in the middle when I hadn't even asked them to? One of those people was Mason. Mason and I had been friends since college, roommates, best men at each other's weddings. Mine never happened, his ended early, the kind of bond where you didn't need small talk because you already knew each other's shorthand. He was part of our shared circle. Lena knew him well. We'd all gone on trips together, Sunday brunches, birthday parties. He was there for it all. And when Lena left, he went quiet. I gave him time. Figured maybe he didn't know what to say. But when I found out he'd RSVP'd to the engagement party, after everything, I stopped making excuses. He texted me once right after the fallout. Something weak like, "Hope you're doing okay, man." I didn't respond. Not because I hated him. But because betrayal doesn't always come with knives, sometimes it shows up in the people who stay silent while you bleed. So when he reached out months later, after Dean's quiet exit and my not-so-quiet promotion, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. "Mason, hey. Can we talk?" We met at a dive bar we used to haunt in our 20s. He was already there when I arrived, beer in hand, that same sheepish grin he used to wear when he broke something and didn't want to admit it. "Hey," he said. "You look good." I nodded. "I am good." He exhaled. Like he'd been bracing for me to come in swinging. "I screwed up," he said. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. I thought. I don't know. I thought it was just messy relationship stuff. That maybe you two just didn't work out. I didn't know about Dean. Not at first. But you knew eventually, I said. He nodded, eyes down. Yeah. And I still didn't say anything. I was trying to stay neutral. There's no neutral in betrayal, Mason. He winced. I know. I see that now. I watched him for a moment. Really watched him. This wasn't performative. He looked tired. Embarrassed. Like a man realizing he'd stood in the wrong corner of the ring for too long and the fight had already ended. I didn't go to the wedding, he added. I blinked. Wedding? Yeah, he said. They eloped last month. Some vineyard. No guests. No fanfare. I only found out because Lena posted a picture, just her and Dean and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my car. I felt nothing. No sting. No rage. Just a quiet, huh. He looked at me again. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for picking the wrong side. For not showing up at all. You deserved better. And if I could go back and fix that. You can't, I said, gently. But you can stop making it about you now. He nodded again. Took a sip of his beer. I miss having you in my life, he said. I miss having friends who knew how to stand still when things got uncomfortable. Oof. That one landed. But I didn't say it to punish him. I said it because it was true. And sometimes the truth doesn't come with a hug. He stayed another 10 minutes. We talked about old stories. Some laughs. But the energy had changed. There was no going back to what we were. That version of our friendship lived in the past, with other things that didn't survive. When I left, he said, "You're a better man than me." And I didn't disagree. Because some people only find their spine after they've already watched yours bend and not break. It didn't happen all at once. You don't just wake up one morning and realize you've moved on. Healing doesn't come with a finish line or some epiphany that snaps everything into place. It creeps in quietly. Like light under a door. Like a laugh that comes out of your mouth and surprises you because, for once, it's real again. I think the day I knew I was finally free was the day I didn't think about them at all. It was a Sunday. Blue skies. Quiet. I was at the farmer's market, wandering between stalls, picking out tomatoes and bread I'd never bother to slice evenly. I caught my reflection in a shop window, simple, just me holding a paper bag full of groceries, and I smiled. Because I looked like someone who'd finally made peace with his own reflection. There was no more weight on my back. No fire in my gut. No need to explain myself to ghosts who chose to haunt someone else's story. Lena and Dean. They became background noise. A couple with matching luggage and matching ambition, riding high on their illusion of being the power couple they thought the world owed them. They lived in a world of surface, curated pictures, hollow toasts, conversations about influence and optics. But I had something better. Real. Real mornings. Real conversations. Real stillness. A few months after Dean's departure and my promotion, I started leading a mentorship group at the office, not because it boosted my resume, but because I remembered what it felt like to feel invisible in a room where someone else held all the cards. I wanted to teach people how to hold their own. I dated again. Carefully. Slowly. Not looking for a replacement or redemption, just connection. Someone who didn't measure masculinity by how loud you are or how fast you win. Someone who knew strength sometimes shows up in silence, in loyalty, in simply staying when it's easier to walk. And eventually, I met her. Not Lena. Not someone like Lena. Someone good. Soft-spoken, but sharp. Kind eyes. Asked questions and actually listened to the answers. We met over coffee, then over books, then over dinners where neither of us needed to pretend we were anything but exactly what we were, people trying again. She asked about Lena once. Early on. I gave her the broad strokes. No bitterness. Just the truth. She nodded and said, "That sounds like a chapter, not the book." And I thought, yeah. That's exactly what it was. One chapter. Not the title. Not the plot. Just the part one had to get through to find the story worth telling. Sometime later, I got a wedding invite from an old friend. Not Mason, someone else from the fringes who stuck by me through the mess. The kind of guy who texted at midnight just to say, "Thinking of you. Don't quit." The invite had a line on the back in small print, "Real men show up when it counts." I smiled. Not because it was clever. But because I did. I showed up. For myself. For the life I built from the ashes of what they tried to leave me in. And I'd do it again. Because in the end, Lena was wrong. I wasn't less of a man. I just wasn't the man she could manipulate. And if that made me not a real man, in her eyes, well, thank God for that.